Hey Russell,
Hey man,
how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Thank you for wanting to do an interview.
Yeah.
And the audio is perfect. I wanted to congratulate you for the liberation of Avdiivka, and I wanted to ask how you felt about the liberation of Avdiivka.
How I heard about it?
How you feel about it?
Oh, well, of course, it's a great victory for Russia. It's a great victory for uh, Ukraine, the decent Ukrainians. There were still civilians living there, and they're now liberated from underneath the Nazi boot. So I'm always glad to see that. Hey, I don't see your picture, bro. I don't see your video.
I don't. I can try and see if I can start my camera. Let me try.
Okay,
Do
it should just be start the video.
does it work?
I'm not seeing it.
The reason why it's not working is because I'm using my camera on my stream right now, so I don't think I can share the camera. That's why.
Okay, that's fine.
So now that Avdiivka has been liberated, is how much more secure has Donetsk become? Because we saw Donetsk was shelled after the liberation of Avdiivka.
Yes, that's exactly right. And to be honest, it hasn't become much more secure in Donetsk, in the city of Donetsk. The western suburbs, like where we live in Petrovsky district, are still getting hit very hard. Kirovsky, Kievsky, still getting bombed very heavy, including artillery, HIMARS, and drones, even in the center of the city. When Russia has a military victory against the Ukrainian Nazis, the Ukrainian and NATO Nazis on the battlefield, those Nazis respond by terrorist attacks against civilian targets. Our library has been attacked since Avdiivka. Our main library in the center of the city was attacked with a HIMARS, which are being run by American Nazis. Um, the hospital has been attacked. Several markets, the Textilchik market has been attacked again. So Avdiivka is not the only place that they were shooting from, and there are still places within range of artillery, drones, and of course, longer range rocket artillery. And we're still getting hit. The civilians, Ukrainians attack civilians when Russian soldiers defeat Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield. And the Russians have made much more important, further important advances since the liberation of Avdiivka, and they continue to do so and will continue to do so.
So, from what I can understand, that means that you need a very big buffer zone from Donetsk in order to secure the safety of the civilians.
That's right. The only buffer zone that is big enough for me and the people here is everything east of Kiev, including Kiev and Odessa. Anything less than that will be considered by many people here, including myself, as a humiliating defeat for Russia. So if Russia makes a deal to go just to, the borders of the Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts, if they make a deal to go just to the Dnieper River, then they're getting whipped at the negotiating table worse than the Russian army is whipping the Ukrainian army right now. So Kiev and Odessa and everything east of a line between those two is the only satisfactory buffer zone. Anything less than that is a failure of the special military operation and Russia getting whipped at the negotiating table. Period.
If they were to negotiate, surely that would include neutrality on behalf of Ukraine, and wouldn't that in turn secure the safety of Donetsk?
We're not worried about the safety of Donetsk. This war is about the future of humanity, and anything less than a decisive military victory in Ukraine by the Russian military will be a decisive defeat for the Russian military. And anything less than Kiev and Odessa and everything east of that will be exactly that.
So you say the safety of humanity. So if we try to talk about the involvement of NATO troops, which has been brought on the table by Macron recently, do you want to give us your impression about that?
NATO troops have been here since 2015, probably before that. They've been here the whole time. They're the ones that, planned the strategy, planned the operations. They're the ones that bombed the Crimea Bridge. They're the ones that made the plans for MH17, which the Ukrainian Air Force jets, piloted by NATO pilots, shot down back in 2014. I heard them myself. I was on the front lines in the village of Spartak, which is between Donetsk and Avdiivka, in 2015. I heard English language on short range Ukrainian army radio frequencies, English in both American accent and in either Australian or English accent. I heard them myself. So they've been here the whole time.
But the difference in NATO being there unofficially and kind of officially publicly is that there will be like almost like a push from more NATO countries to be engaged in the war in Ukraine. Ukraine could look like the battlefield between NATO and Russia.
Well, and I expect that NATO is going to try exactly that. I mean, the phone call of the German generals that just got released.
Yes.
Macron's admission, the fact that the Operation Steadfast Defender that's going on right now with 90,000 NATO troops in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Romania, in the Baltic states, all of these point towards the only reasonable conclusion is that NATO troops are going to at least try and come in. And it will be a suicidal mistake on the part of Russia if they allow it. If they don't, and I think in the last couple of days, Vladimir Putin and the foreign ministry have said that, has warned NATO not to send in troops on a, substantial and open basis. That if they do, they will be considered legitimate targets and treated accordingly, which is, of course, the only legitimate response to it.
From what I can understand, NATO is bound by their masters, America, to go in. So a warning won't work because they will be willing to take that hit. So it looks like the NATO countries, some NATO countries at least, are willing to be sacrificed in order to go in. Poland, Romania, Moldova.
Well, they will be sacrificed, hopefully, if they do. But the NATO countries of the European Union have to take a very serious estimation of what's going to happen. They're going to be sending their soldiers, to the meat grinder, to suicide. And those soldiers have families back in their respective countries. And, if a bunch of soldiers, NATO soldiers, start dying here, then that will be reflected in the political landscape of their respective countries. And hopefully it will lead to revolution because, what the world needs now is the overthrow and destruction of the genuine Nazi regimes that rule most of Europe and the United States and Canada and Australia and New Zealand by any means necessary. And if it needs to go back to, the style of the French Revolution, then so be it, because that's better than the alternative.
I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. If you look at Europe, they look way too passive.
Well, I don't know if you've looked at Europe lately, but certainly the farmers don't look too passive. You know, they're
True.
blocking Paris, that are blocking the borders, that are spewing, cow manure onto the doorways of government buildings, that are fighting in the streets with the police. And some of the police are joining those farmers too. I mean, so they're setting a good example. I mean, certainly a better example than what's happening in the United States, where some people think that they're revolutionaries because they go stand on the street corner with a sign that says Free Palestine or something like that. But, you know, just like with the Maidan, just like with the fall of the Soviet Union, it can happen real fast, and it can happen in a big surprise. And I hope it does. And because the thing is, the only hope for humanity, the only choice that humanity has right now is either that the people who live underneath these Nazi regimes will rise up and take care of those regimes themselves, or Russia's going to have to do it with Sarmat and Poseidon missiles.
The
And
biggest
then it's the end of the world. It's the end
the
of
biggest
humanity.
problem in Europe is that the European people, they don't see their leaders as Nazis, and they don't realize the issue. They might not want to go to war with Russia, but they haven't really gotten an insight into what the hell is happening, like how you're saying it is. That's not how they're seeing it. So from the farmers
Well,
to
that's
go
how the
to
stupid ones aren't seeing it, but anyone with any sense cannot even argue with that. I mean, they're all supporting Ukraine, which is genuine Nazis. I mean, when you give weapons to Nazis, when you give them intelligence, when you give them strategic direction, when you give them political cover, that makes you a Nazi too. And only a fool can't see that. And
yep.
yes, there are a lot of idiots in Europe, just as there are a lot of idiots and cowards, just as there are in the United States. But anyone that doesn't see the fascist governments, I mean, Denmark's in NATO, right?
Yes,
So you have a Nazi government. What are you doing about it
I know,
besides making
but
videos?
I know, dude, I know, but I don't know what to do about it. And so there's no one either. Most Europeans, they don't realize that Ukraine are Nazis either, because there's no opposing views in Europe.
Well, then they're sheep and cattle, and they deserve what they're going to get. And if they don't take care of their Nazi governments, then Russia's going to do it with a fireball hotter than the center of the sun, and the people there who didn't do anything are going to have it coming.
But that's how it's gonna be, because I don't see the European people having the even a chance to realize what's happening.
Well, I mean, how do I understand? How did I understand from Texas what was happening 10 years ago? Am I a genius? Am I like, some messiah from the future or something? I mean,
The,
anybody that's not, anybody that's stupid enough to eat a shit sandwich deserves what they get.
but most of the people are like that. They won't realize it. And even you also have a shit ton of Americans and Europeans who actually realize what's happening, but for some reason they're still supporting it.
Well, then they're idiots and hypocrites. I mean, people are born with a brain and a spine. That's what makes them human. To be able to have, intelligence and integrity based on that intelligence and the courage to do something about it, that's what makes somebody human. Otherwise you can just be, a monkey in the zoo or something. Because you're worthless. And
But
that's
remember,
that's
so
what a lot of people are. And those people, they don't even have a right to an opinion because they don't even know what's going on. They can't even think for themselves.
so you're criticizing people for not doing anything about it, right?
I despise people who aren't doing anything about it. I blame them for the problems of the world right now. And
So
it's not like it's my personal animosity or something. I mean, it's a simple fact, bro. I mean, anyone that doesn't know that the Ukrainians are genuine neo-Nazis, that to say Slava Bandera is the same exact thing as saying Heil Hitler, Anyone that doesn't know that isn't qualified to have an opinion, is not qualified to have an opinion. They're
So,
idiots.
so anyone who wanted to help, you would be willing to help them, right? So you want to assist them.
I already helped them, bro. I set the example. You know, the people in Gaza are setting the example. The Houthis are setting the example. Hezbollah is setting the example. The people of Donbass have set the example for 10 years. No, I'm not going to London to throw Molotov cocktails at Buckingham Palace. I already showed them what to do. They have to do it themselves. I came here to fight. I didn't come here to be a journalist or a war tourist or an internet star. I came here to kill Nazis, and I've done that. And that's the only way to defeat Nazis. They're like a mad dog or a poisonous snake.
So anyone who wanted to fight Nazis, they could, in theory, get a hold of you, and they could be helping.
No, if they want to fight Nazis, it's time for them to do it where they are now, in Europe or in the United States or in Canada or in Australia or in New Zealand or in Denmark.
It's tough for people to rise up in this place because that's
Don't
essentially.
I know it, bro? Don't I know it? You think it was easy here in Donetsk in fucking 2014? Do you think it was easy when we had AK-47s against tanks? And I'm talking about me personally, bro. Do you think that was easy then? Of course it's tough. So, anybody with no courage is a coward and also worthless.
But in Donbass, there was someone to join, right?
Yeah. And I got here as quick as I could.
There's no one to join in Europe.
Well, I'll tell you who you can join is the French farmers, the German farmers. Go join the farmers, man.
Okay.
Go join those guys. They're blocking roads. They're setting stuff on fire. They're pouring cow manure on the government buildings. They're fighting with the police that are trying to stop them. Go join them.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It does make sense, doesn't it? I mean, you understand you're fighting for the future of yourself, your family, your children, and humanity. On your feet or on your knees.
Okay.
That's the choice you got.
What would you do in the case of the Americans? What should they do?
The same exact thing. They're waiting around. They're getting fed with TV and McDonald's and stuff like that. And they're saying, oh, maybe things will get better. I ask my American friends, and you can ask your European friends too, name one thing in your lifetime that your government has done that has made the lives of regular, common, working class people better. Name one thing. Name one thing. Go ahead, bro. Name one.
I don't know.
In your whole life.
Yeah. I don't know.
So what does that tell you? The purpose of any government is to improve the lives of the citizens that elect that government. And those citizens have the right to dismantle that government if it's not doing anything to make their lives better.
But
that's not like a legal thing. That's like the basis of humanity. It's the most basic moral law, natural law in life is the right to self-defense. And if the people that you have allowed to rule you are taking away your food, injecting you with poison, sending you to wars in other countries that don't benefit anybody in the world except the 1% parasite class and the weapons dealers, then you're going to die either way. So are you going to die, with your pants down, grabbing your ankles and squealing and crying? Or are you going to die like a man or like a human being standing up to genuine evil, bro. This is a battle of genuine evil, of Satanism against humanity. And you're either on one side or the other.
But who do the American joins? Like the European are joining the farmers. What about the Americans? Who do they join?
It's not a question of joining, dude. Somebody's got to be the first one. What was this guy, Aaron Bushnell, that set himself on fire the other day? You know what? That was a very brave act, and it was a symbolic act, and he deserves respect, and he deserves to go down in history for doing that, just like Tron Duck did when he set himself, the Buddhist monk that set himself on fire outside of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon back during the Vietnam War. And perhaps someday he will. But he screwed up. This Bushnell guy screwed up because he set the wrong person on fire.
Okay. Okay.
You think I'm funny, dude?
No, I see you. I see you. So
this ain't no joke, man. I mean, we're still getting bombed here. You know, what goes around comes around. If you don't think that your masters, your rulers, are going to push this thing until Russia pushes the button and Copenhagen gets incinerated or washed away by a 1,000-meter tidal wave, just wait, bro. Just wait. Because it's you and your children and the future of Denmark and Europe and the world that's going to pay for the stupidity and the cowardice of the people in Europe and the United States and Australia and New Zealand and Canada. They're the ones who are letting this happen. It's their responsibility to rein in their own Nazi governments. And they're not doing it. And they're going to get what they got coming.
So you think Russia would be willing to nuke in the case of escalations in Ukraine?
I guarantee it, bro. I guarantee it. It's the right move. You know, at some point they got to put their foot down. They've been getting provoked. They've been getting lied to. They've been getting ripped off since 1990, bro. When NATO said, oh, we won't go 1 inch further to the east. And now they're all the way to the Russian borders. Russia is now surrounded by NATO Nazi governments.
But the Russian nuclear doctrine only allows for the use of nuke if the state is in risk, right?
Well, if they start sending troops into NATO, NATO troops into Ukraine, that's a pretty serious risk. If NATO troops start shooting at Russian soldiers in an organized and substantial fashion, that's a risk for Russia. What are they going to wait until? NATO troops, who do you think is shooting these HIMARS missiles, bro? UCROP soldiers aren't smart enough to use those kind of weapons. Who do you think is going to be flying the F-16s? Who do you think was driving those boat drones that blew up the Crimea Bridge, man? The NATO troops are already here. They're just still laying low. If they come in out in the open, and of course they won't come out in the open. What's going to happen? NATO is going to come in probably before the end of the summer. They're going to say, oh, we're just going to come in as peacekeepers. We're just going to guard Kiev and Odessa and, the western bank of the Dnieper River. But that already puts them halfway into Ukraine. And it also frees up 90,000 Ukrainian Nazi soldiers that are currently guarding those positions. NATO comes in and starts guarding them. That's 90,000 more soldiers that UCROP Army can send to Donbass for another offensive, which is probably what's going to happen.
But the problem is that America, who's controlling the NATO states, they would be willing to let the NATO states be nuked.
Dude, And that's not the problem. The problem is that the European people in those NATO countries are letting them. I mean, how much harder can Germany have been fucked than it already got fucked?
I know,
I
but
mean, look at their economy is destroyed. The U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which absolutely, without question, led to the direct destruction of the German economy. All the big businesses in Germany, all the big industries are now moving to the United States because the United States is charging Germany 4, 5, or 6 times more for their, energy than what Russian was selling it to them for. So the people that Scholz and them, Bierbach, are bending over for are the ones that are screwing Germany to death, dude, to death. So it's up to those people again. That's the whole equation right there. If the people of European countries, including Denmark, don't take matters into their own hands, take care of their own business, save their own countries, if Russia comes in, Russia's not going to come and liberate Europe like it did 80 years ago. They're just going to burn it down. They're just going to burn it down, and all the people there are going to deserve it. Not all of them, but more than 90% of them are going to have it coming, bro. It's that simple.
but like I said, for instance, in Germany, there's so much control of the information that they don't really realize what's going on, which makes it hard for them to have the
Bro, life is hard. That's a bogus excuse, bro. That's a pathetic and ridiculous excuse. This is the age of information. In the information age, ignorance is a choice, and it's a stupid and cowardly choice. The information is out there. Oh, it's hard for me to, get a VPN so I can watch RT. It's hard for me to, look up, you know, Operation Steadfast Defender on the internet. You know, what do you think this is? I mean, what is it supposed to be? That everybody sits in their bed and plays computer games or something? No, this is life. It's never been easy. And it's hard now, and it's getting ready to get oh so much harder, bro. Oh so much harder.
I don't personally. I don't see the European rising up, dude. I don't see it. I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. I just don't see it happening.
Well, I mean, all you have to do, the farmers are doing it. They're doing it. They're the ones to go join right now. They're the ones to go join right now. I mean, you look at it. How did the Vietnamese beat the U.S. Army? How did the American colonialists beat the British Army? How did the Cubans beat the Cuban Army and, backed by the Americans? How did Donbass beat the Ukrainian Army? How did they do it? Because they decided to do it, even if it meant that they would die. Being a soldier, being a hero doesn't mean that you're willing to kill. It means you're willing to die for something bigger and more important than yourself. And that's it, dude. And these, cowardice is contemptible. You can't trust a coward. No one, because they can't trust themselves. Stupidity. You know what the difference between ignorance and stupidity is?
No.
Well, I'll tell you. Somebody that is ignorant doesn't know the facts. Someone that's stupid doesn't want to know the facts. And that's the problem right there. There's a lot of stupid people. A lot of stupid people that don't want to know the facts. But, people that are cowards, people that are stupid, by that definition, they're just a waste of space, man. What good are they? What good are they? You tell me. Tell me, what good are they? What use
I don't know if they're any good, but
in the world is a stupid coward.
there's some of them are still innocent.
Well, I'm not talking about 3-year-old kids, bro. Like the ones that are getting slaughtered by Israel in Gaza with the backing of the United States and all the European countries and the Arab countries. You know, I'm not talking about a 3-year-old kid, but anybody that's reached the age of adulthood that knows how to read has no excuse, has no excuse.
Okay.
It's that simple, man.
Yeah.
I mean, what good are they? You know, and I'm not trying to sound like a Nazi and say that I want to go kill everybody that doesn't agree with me. But I'm saying that that's what they're going to get from the people whose ass they kiss right now. That's what their rulers are going to do to them.
In order for anyone in Europe to just consider doing what you're suggesting, things needs to get a lot worse. A lot worse.
Well, don't worry about it, bro. But understand this. By the time it gets bad enough to motivate someone who's been a stupid coward their whole life, by then there's going to be, drones flying up and down the streets, shooting anybody that's out after curfew or doesn't have their injections up to date. You'll be, there comes a time when technology will become impossible for human people to defeat. And that time is coming soon. And the people, the true Satanists who want to, depopulate the world by about 90%, they're working on that technology 24/7, bro. And you best believe it. In the Bible, which I'm a Christian, I believe in God. In the Bible, it says the apocalypse, the 4 horsemen, bro. It's famine, it's war, and it's pestilence, which is disease. And the 4th horseman is death, and hell followed after. I mean, I'm 63 years old. I'll be lucky if I live another 10 years and don't have a heart attack or something, So I've had a great, interesting life. And I'll tell you something. I was born in 1960, and I've seen the world change over the last 64 years, dude. I've seen where it was going, and I understand the trajectory of it. And I tell you, it's going to get worse before it gets better, if it gets better.
How, you probably don't know this, but how does Russia come into play when it comes to depopulation?
Well, I can tell you this, Russia was very, shall we say, reluctant and conservative in their response to, the COVID, brouhaha. They didn't use the Moderna or the Pfizer or the Johnson and Johnson vaccines. You know what? The Sputnik vaccine that they did use, because they did understand that the virus, the COVID virus, was a biological weapon that was created in a laboratory and released intentionally. And so they had the Sputnik vaccine. And you know what? You don't see 10-year-old kids in Russia having heart attacks. You don't see, elite professional athletes, dying on the field. You don't see, these, 30-centimeter blood clots being pulled out of, bodies when they're trying to be embalmed or something, So, Russia, and also Russia has, one of the best food security of any country in the world right now. I mean, they just gave away 200,000 tons of grain to Africa for free, and they're the main exporter of grain in the world now, which means that they have plenty enough for at home. So Russia has food security. Russia's not falling for, the disease, and Russia can win the Third World War, or at least destroy all their enemies before they too die. So Russia is faring very well. Yes, they've made some mistakes. They've had to catch up on some stuff, but from a point of national security, there's no place in Europe, there's no place in the world that can touch them. Maybe China, but I'd rather live in Russia than China, so that's why I'm here.
But what about if Russia was unable to use their crops for 2 years? Would they still have food security?
Well, I mean, that's like saying, if you don't have a job for 2 years and don't have a single penny of income for 2 years, are you still going to have money in the bank? No, I mean, of course not. I mean, that's kind of a dumb question, bro. I mean, of course, if the crops fail for 2 years, it's going to be a famine. If the crops fail for 2 years anywhere, I mean, and I'm not saying that people will starve to death, because all the crops aren't going to fail. Even in a drought, even in whatever, and Russia has mechanisms to get enough food to survive. It's not going to be like Somalia or, wherever, something like that, where, people are dying, laying in the street from starvation. It's not going to be like that in Russia. I mean, people could die of starvation. It's happened here before, in the 1930s, in the Dust Bowl, when people were dying of starvation in the United States, in Europe, they were also dying of starvation in Russia and in Ukraine. And that's a fact. And I'm not saying it couldn't happen again. I'm saying it could happen again. And it's, the rulers of the world, the people who own the governments of most of the countries in the world, are working hard to make it happen. And I'll tell you something that is really scary, is that all these farmers that are protesting, rightfully so, in Europe right now, unfortunately, they're not out in their fields planting their crops.
Mm-hmm.
And in nature, you only have, you can't go plant your crop at the end of July. Right now is planting time. Right now is planting time. And all these farmers who've been so screwed over by, totally counterproductive regulations that make it impossible for them to make a living for themselves growing food, they're protesting it, and they have the right and justification to protest it. But unfortunately for the people of Europe, there's going to be a big shortage of food in Europe this year, bro.
Yep, there is.
And it's being done on purpose, not by the farmers, but by the parasite class, by the people who own and control the governments of the EU.
Could you not imagine a situation where the West would deploy some sort of weapon in Russia that would make the farms somewhat unusable?
Would make
That's what I was.
unusable?
The farmland unusable.
Yes, of course. I mean, it would not be the first time. The United States used biological weapons against food crops. For sure, it's been proven and documented multiple times against Cuba since the Cuban Revolution. That's beyond dispute. You know, I mean, when they sprayed Agent Orange all over Vietnam, that's a defoliant. It kills all the plants that it gets sprayed on, the trees, the crops, whatever else. You know, it's really dangerous for the people too. I mean, so yes, biological warfare. I mean, when Russia talks about all these bio labs that were in Ukraine and some still are, and some have been moved to other countries, you know, these are biological weapons factories. You know, they're not trying to find the cure for cancer. They're trying to find a poison that affects only people with Russian DNA. You know, I mean, you understand that, you know, if you destroy the food crops, it gets to a point where, you know, a loaf of bread is $200. And if you're a billionaire, you don't care if it's $200 or $2,000. You'll have bread with your steak and your Lafitte Rothschild wine, no problem, because you got the money. But most people that don't have the money, you know, I mean, and you see all these things like right now in America where they let all these gangs of shop crashers go in and, like, you know, 10 or
Yep.
20 hoodlums go into a store and just start stealing stuff off the shelves and run out, right?
Yep.
Okay. Now imagine when it gets down to the grocery stores, you know, because, you know, if you don't have food, when you get hungry, it's like Bob Marley said, a hungry mob is an angry mob, you know, and if you don't have food, if you're starving, you know, that's the worst way that there is to die. It is the worst way that there is to die because it takes about 2 months to starve to death. And in that time, you know, you'll do anything to get some food. You'll sell your soul. You'll sell your children. You know, so of course that's, you know, their preferred weapon because they're not just out to kill us. They're not just out to kill our bodies. They're out to kill our souls, you know?
Okay.
And that's what it is, dude. People need to understand this is a battle between good and evil, and we're all on one side or the other. And those who do nothing are on the side of evil.
How about
No
have you
evil
been
hates.
have you been following the latest in Gaza?
Of course I have.
You want to say something about that?
Well, I mean, what is there to say? Again, you know, only an idiot, only someone that lies to themselves can pretend that this isn't, you know, medieval style German Nazi style genocide. You know, these people, you know, the so-called Israelis are using starvation. They're bombing civilians. They're targeting civilians with snipers and tanks. You know, I mean, and, you know, I'll tell you what Gaza is, bro. It's a experiment to see what the world is going to do about it. And the world has already shown what it's going to do about it. It isn't going to do shit. And so the people, you know, you know, the Zionists know, okay, if we do the same thing in Donetsk, nobody's going to care as long as it ain't them. You know, if we do the same thing in Belgorod in Russia, maybe the Russians will care and maybe they'll do something about it. But, you know, if we do the same thing in Copenhagen, what are they going to do about it? Who's going to come save them?
There is 2.5 million people in Gaza, and in Denmark there is 8 million people.
So what?
It's like destroying a quarter of Denmark.
Exactly. And I mean, and people need to understand what goes around comes around. What their masters are doing to other people in other countries today, they're going to get around to doing to their own citizens in their own country pretty soon. Pretty soon.
I agree. Sadly, I just don't. I don't see the people having the willingness to do anything about it. But maybe once it gets way worse, yeah, they will do it. Same with America. But Europe is the first issue right now. Sadly, it sucks. But
Well, it's I mean, people. I mean, courage and heroism are contagious. So is intelligence. And people set the example. And other good people will follow and join and get to work. I mean, this dude, this kid, Aaron Bushnell, that burned himself to death. I mean,
yeah,
that took a lot of courage, dude. I mean, I've watched that video and I knew how he felt when he was walking up there with that thermos full of gasoline in his hand. But he didn't chicken out. And he stood there on fire, yelling, "Free Palestine." He did it for that reason. And that's real courage. I mean, to me, he should have got a lot more gasoline and squirted it on, some other people instead of himself. And he would have died the same, he would have died just the same, but it would have been a quicker death and it would have been a better example and it would have been more effective as to doing what needs to be done.
yep.
Nancy Pelosi and Bill Gates and Victoria Nuland and Scholz and Macron, they go walking around and yeah, they got a bunch of bodyguards, but I don't know if you ever saw that video of some guy that threw a pie in Bill Gates' face one day
I
when he was
saw it.
walking in
Yeah,
somewhere.
I saw it.
Well, I mean, and the whole point of that, I mean, the whole point of pieing, which was a thing back in the 60s and 70s, was to show, if I can throw a pie in your face, I could have had a 45 caliber pistol instead, I could have got you. But it's a waste to try and, make a moral argument with these kind of monsters that already sold their souls and stuff that are bent on destroying humanity. So the time for pies is over. And people, I mean, it is a disgrace that the people who are destroying humanity can still walk around and nobody does anything. If people had the courage of Aaron Bushnell, they could say, like a kamikaze pilot or something, they could say, hey, look, there's something more important than my life. If they understood correctly, they'd say, there's a better way to die than begging for mercy, begging for, dog food from the people that are killing me. It's quicker, it's less painful, and it makes a difference. Or you can sit there and beg for dog food, So the people in Donetsk stood up, dude. The people in 2014, I mean, I got here in December 2014, but we were fighting literally with AK-47s, against tanks 1 kilometer away. And we couldn't do anything about it, We could have ran away, but we didn't, And that's why we won. That's why we held the line. That's why Donetsk isn't like Gaza right now, because we held the line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Houthis set a great example. Those guys are willing to die for what they believe in, and what they believe in is right. You know, they're not saying, oh, you know, we're going to die defending our country, which they will and which they have against the Saudi Arabian, US-backed Saudi Arabian mercenaries for 10 years. But they say, we're willing to die for the innocent people of Palestine. We're going to fight until Israel stops genocide against Palestine. And that's what it means to be a hero, to have a meaning, something more important in your life than just yourself.
Well said. Yeah.
That's what it's all about, dude. Courage is the key to happiness, because it's impossible to be happy if you are afraid. It is impossible to be happy if you are afraid. And there's too many people that are, you know, that are used to being afraid, and they're miserable. I mean, when I came to Donetsk in 2014, in December of 2014, I didn't expect to live until springtime, but I came anyway. And I said, either I'm going to live or I'm going to die fighting for something that's right in the company of heroes. You know, and it's like the old cliche saying by Margaret Mead, you know, don't think that a small group of determined people can't change the world, because that's the only thing that ever has. And yes, it won't be easy. And yes, probably if somebody starts a revolution in Europe or the United States, you know, there's less than 50-50 chance that they'll succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't fight, there's zero chance that they'll succeed.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's plenty of examples of where, against the longest odds, they have succeeded. You know, Vietnam, Cuba, you know, Nicaragua, Donetsk, Donbass, you know. But the thing is, it's like, you know, it helps a lot if you believe in God, if you believe that, you know, this isn't the only life and this isn't the only world, and where you go when your body dies depends on what you did in this life when you were still driving your body around, you know. But, you know, even the ones that fought and lost, you know, like you take 300 Spartans, you take the Alamo, 186 Texans surrounded by 3,000 Mexican soldiers, and the general Santa Anna said, if you guys don't surrender, we're going to take the fort and we're going to kill everybody there. And they could have surrendered, but they didn't. And they fought and they died. And people in Texas still know the names of those guys to this day. You know, people go to the Alamo and they weep, you know, with the love and respect for those guys who chose to die as heroes. We're all going to die, bro. We're all going to die. You want to die like in a bed, you know, with a tube up your dick, you know, crapping in a diaper and being fed some mush down your nose? Or do you want to die like a hero? Or do you want to die like a slave? That's the choice we have. We're all going to die. Our choice is what we do determines what our lives mean. And so we can either be a hero, or we can be a stupid coward, we can be a slave, or we can be a revolutionary. We all die in the end either way, so why not be a hero? if things keep getting worse and worse, what's the great deal about sticking around? Why not try and fight it and make it better, or die trying like a hero? And I mean, and I'm not just some dude that, you know, is, sitting in a coffee house with a Che Guevara t-shirt talking this. Dude, I lived it. I came here. I put my life on the line. And uh, what am I, Superman or something? If I can do it, you can do it. Anybody listening to this interview can do it if they decide to. Aaron Bushnell decided to. That there'll be monuments to him in Palestine. His name will be remembered for as long as there are still Palestinian people, as long as there are still people who respect heroes in this world. And, like I said, I don't think I think he had good intentions. He obviously had courage. If you're going to decide to go out, then take some Nazis with you. Basically that was my feeling when I came here.
If you're gonna say some more stuff to encourage the Americans explicitly, what would you say?
I would say that only idiots vote in America. The political system there is completely rigged. There's nobody good to vote for. Nobody that is worth a shit is ever going to ever be allowed to even run, much less be elected. Trump's as bad as Biden. RFK Jr. is sold out to the same people that own both Trump and Biden. Who else are you going to be? I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke. There's zero chance. What it is, it's a distraction for idiots who think that, we'll go vote for Ralph Nader, which actually I did back in the year 2000. That was the last time I voted. But, it's a way of letting people let off steam, of distracting them from the fact that nothing ever gets better, and it only gets worse, and it's only going to continue to. It's like, it's like playing a computer game or something. It's like playing, and I've never played computer games, but it's like, say, playing Call of Duty and thinking that you're a soldier. Voting is for idiots. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Only idiots waste their time these days. I mean, what politicians say means nothing. Means nothing. What they do says everything. So, so it can't be reformed. The political system in the United States cannot be reformed. Needs to be smashed. Everybody that's a part of it needs to be completely removed from power, any kind of power, by any means necessary. I mean, it has to be a revolution, bro. It has to be a revolution. And revolutions get bloody on both sides.
So let's suppose you're an American and you used to vote, you realize how the system is not working. Now you are hearing your words. What are the next step?
Well, prepare and start working. One person can, it's so tragic when you see, these lunatics, I don't know what they are, brainwashed, or, I don't know, mind controlled or something like that. These people that feel so desperate and their life is so worthless that they think they're going to go, start shooting people at a school or at a bar, or, whatever, a rock concert or whatever like that. I mean, there are people who need to be neutralized. And if you can even neutralize one of those people, then you've done a huge service for humanity. Because because that's the problem with Bushnell, man. He didn't set a good example. Because they don't care how many people go out in the street and burn themselves to death. They don't care. It doesn't mean nothing to the people that he should have poured that gasoline on. So he set a bad example. The Vietnamese and the Cubans and the people here in Donbass, they set a good example. The Houthis set a good example. Hezbollah sets a good example because they point their weapons at the right targets and they don't miss. So there you go, man. It's really that simple. And again, the people in the West, in the United States, in Europe, in Denmark, the only choice they have now is to either stand up as heroes or live the rest of their life on their knees begging for mercy from people who have no mercy. And we'll squeeze them until they're dry. So that's the choice. If you sit back and watch, the later it gets, the harder it's going to get.
Okay. Well said. I think a lot of the people in the chat, they agree with you. Yeah.
Well, they don't agree with me because I'm Russell Bentley. They don't agree with me because I'm good looking. They understand that this is the truth.
Yep.
And so understanding is the first step. Doing something about it is the next step. And I'm not saying that you have to go out and, start, shooting up your town or something, but you have to do something. You have to make. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was a traitor to the Soviet Union, but he was a very good writer. And he wrote about his experiences when he got arrested. And he said that the people, the NKVD used to come around at night, kick the people's door in. People lived in apartments. They'd hear, the door get kicked in on the floor below or next door, whatever like that. And they'd all hide in their apartments and hope it wasn't coming for them. And they'd hear their neighbor get taken away. And Solzhenitsyn made the point, man. He said, if the people had gotten together, even if they didn't have guns, if you got 8 guys waiting on the darkened staircase for the 2, and the 8 guys have, axes or baseball bats or, a bottle of gasoline, when the 4 and the 2 or the 4 or the 6 dudes with guns come to take one of their neighbors away, and they handle those dudes that are coming, then the other dudes whose job it is to go take people away are going to start thinking twice before they go out at night. And they're maybe going to be a little more reluctant to do their job. And they're maybe going to ask themselves why they're doing that job. And then maybe they're going to say, hey, I'm going to go join the other side. There's been many examples where, people, people are protesting or something, and then the cops come over to the protesters' side. It can happen. Courage and dignity and intelligence are contagious. If one person stands up, then two other people say, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. And then other people say, hey, if they can do it, we can do it. And if the people of Donbass can do it, the people of Europe and the United States can do it. And they need to get busy, man, because, for me, like I said, I'm old. I'll be lucky if I got 10 more years. And I understand if somebody's in their 20s or their 30s, they're like, hey, man, I don't want to go so soon. And I don't blame them. But if they understand that the world is just going to keep getting worse and worse, they're going to keep taking your freedoms, taking your ability to support yourself and sustain yourself, taking your human dignity. They're going to keep saying, all right, yes, this meat is made out of shit. It's made out of bugs, but you're going to eat it. And you're either going to say, yes, sir, or you're going to say no, and you're going to do something about it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
On your feet or on your knees.
Yep.
We've done it here in Donbass. Look, I got a machine gun sitting right behind me. You see that?
Yep.
It's not airsoft, bro.
No.
And so, I'll tell you something. I hate to see, like, was corresponding with the guy from Australia, and he's telling me how humiliated, the once brave and strong and independent and proud people of Australia, how humiliated they are now. And, and I remember when it happened, and it was when the Australians, there was some, school shooting or something, and the Australians just said, okay, we're taking away everybody's guns. Everybody has to bring their guns in. And the majority of people did. And once that happened, the government can do anything they want now. I mean, yes, it's very hard to, try and fight some dude in body armor and a helmet and with an M16 when all you got's a rock or a slingshot. But consider your alternative, bro.
Mm-hmm.
That dude's going to put you in a slave camp. He's going to feed you bugs. He's going to do anything he wants to you unless you stop him.
Okay.
So, to the people in the United States, I would say this too. The American government is going to sooner or later find a way to start taking away guns just like they did in Australia. Take a lesson from Australia. Once you give up the guns, you give up your choice. You give up any chance to stand up and fight back. You give up your ability to defend yourself and humanity. But I'll tell you something too, and you can watch this and you can take it to the bank too, man. Before the government in the United States starts taking away the guns, they're going to prohibit the sale of ammunition. That's going to be the sign. And I can tell you, it's not hard at all to make a gun. I've made homemade shotguns. I made a homemade machine gun before, and it worked. Guns are not hard to make. Bullets are hard to make. So once they start shutting down the sale of ammunition, it's too late to go out and buy some, dude. But if you have some boxes of, 12 gauge shotgun shells, you can make a pretty good close range shotgun for about $20 out of hardware store parts.
Okay.
So ammunition's way more important than having a gun. Easier to hide too, easier to buy right now in the United States. So take
Why
what it's worth.
why are the Republicans being pro guns if they want to take them away?
The Republicans are pro-gun for people that are also Republicans. They're pro-gun for, rich, conservative white people. It's and that's all a show too, man. And I can guarantee something, man. Every Republican government representative or bureaucrat or something like that, I guarantee they carry a gun, or else they have a couple of bodyguards that are carrying guns that are with them 24/7. So it's a very popular thing is to say the right to bear arms. But you understand there's a really big difference between having a gun and being willing to use it. And I don't mean being willing to use it against a bunch of unarmed school children, but being willing to use it against people that also have guns, maybe bigger and better ones, and body armor that are going to be using theirs against you. For every 100 people that own a gun in the United States, maybe 3 or 5 of them would actually be willing to use them for any, principle or for any, moral or ideological purpose.
But that should be enough. If 3 out of 100 is willing to use it the right way, that should be enough for America to stand up, right?
Indeed, it is. And indeed, it's not should be, it is, dude. You can think about it. The United States has 300 plus million civilian, population. 3% of that is 9 million people. That's more than the United States has in the Army, a lot more. Of course, there's also the police, there's also the National Guard, there's also the Navy, there's also the Marines, but 9 million people with guns out in the street can change things. And the other 97% of Americans that are too stupid or too lazy or too chicken shit to do anything, they're just going to hide at home. Usually, revolutions, civil wars are between 20%, that are actual militants on each 20% on one side, 20% on the other side, and 60% they're just sitting there watching and aren't willing to do anything for either side, except, kiss the ass of whichever side wins.
How do you see the trigger point being in America for any sort of movement like that?
Well, I don't know. I haven't been in America for 10 years, man. I
In some ways, it seems to me like America is kind of like Europe, except they have weapons, but they are fighting over so many cultural things that they don't seem to care about them being hijacked.
Well, that's it. It's the politics of the personal. If the most important thing in your life is that somebody gets your pronouns right, well, then again, first of all, you're too stupid to have an opinion about anything. But if you don't care about anything but that, or about your money or about, whatever else, it's like your sports team or something. If you don't care about anything about besides something that doesn't really matter at all, then, you're not going to do anything. You're going to be useless and worthless to anybody. So, and then, it's the most basic, technique since the Roman days, divide and conquer. The blacks against the whites, the gays against the straights, the, young against the old, the rich against the poor. And really, The one that counts is the rich against the poor. There's no war but the class war. Everything else is bogus. The 1%, the parasite class, has and is working right now on a project to depopulate the world by famine, by disease, and by war. And what's happening in Gaza, what's been happening in Donetsk, it's like shifting the Overton window, from what was unimaginable to what's uncomfortable to what's objectionable to what everybody's gotten used to, I mean, dude, in Donetsk, I wake up some mornings and I can hear shelling in the city between the time I wake up and the time I put my feet on the floor. Some days we hear it all day long, and I've gotten used to it, dude. I mean, and so just as people get used to seeing these terrible photos and videos and reports about what's happening in Gaza, just as they got used to hearing about the terrible things that have happened here in Donbass or Syria, they get used to it. And then once they get used to seeing it happen far away, the closer it gets to their house, to their town, they're used to it until it gets to their town and they're like, hey, why doesn't everybody care? Why doesn't everybody care? Because you didn't care when it was somebody else. We are all related. Everything in this world affects everything else in this world. We are all related, bro. What goes around comes around. And the world is spinning faster these days. And what goes around starts coming back around a lot quicker than it used to. So there's not a lot of time, dude. The development of technology is going to make it pretty soon impossible for anyone to do anything. I mean, they're working right now on like crime prediction. Pretty soon, our artificial intelligence is going to say, hey, that dude right there might throw a Molotov cocktail next week. And they're going to come and arrest you before you do. And dude, I spent 5 years in prison for smuggling weed. And I can tell you, once you get inside of a prison, it's designed to make it difficult for you to get out. Real difficult. So there comes a point when it's too late. And that point is coming very soon for humanity. And so the people in the West, take a lesson from Donbass. Live like a hero or die like a slave. That's the choice.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, looks like we've talked for like over an hour now. I probably ought to let you go.
Thank you so much, Russell. We should do this again.
Sure, man. Glad to talk to you. Hey, if you can, send me a link to where people can watch, if you've got it recorded or it's just a live stream.
I will do both. It's a live stream and then I will upload it somewhere.
Excellent, excellent. What kind of estimate do you have on how many people were watching it? You said like about the chat or something.
We have 50, 60 people watching. Some of them interchange, so it's the concurrent viewership is around 57. And
right. We'll get a lot more with the. Send me the link, bro. I'll put it out on my platforms.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Good luck, man.
Thank you.
Get busy.
Yep.
All right.
See ya. Bye.